My husband thought I'd never find out about my inheritance. He was wrong. The daisy slipped from my fingers and landed in a puddle. Rain mixed with petals on the street, turning everything grey. The air smelled of wet dust and crushed stems. I bent to pick it up, but a voice behind me said, "No flower deserves to be trampled." I looked up. A man in a grey coat stood there, holding out the daisy like it mattered. His eyes were gentle, the kind that looked right through noise and saw quiet. "Thank you," I murmured. The rain slid down his sleeve, shining like tiny threads of light. Behind me, Daniel honked the car horn twice. "Emma, we're late again." His words cut through the soft rhythm of the rain. I climbed in quickly, clutching my basket to my chest. The smell of fuel replaced the smell of flowers. As we drove, he muttered about wasted time, about how nobody bought enough to make the stall worth it. I stared out the window at the stranger's fading shape. Something about his calm stayed with me. I didn't know then that the man who picked up a single daisy would one day uncover everything Daniel tried so hard to keep buried. Every morning, I opened my tiny stall beside the bus stop before sunrise. Mist rolled down the hill, covering the street in silver. The world smelled of earth and promise. I arranged roses, lilies, and always daisies. They reminded me of my grandmother's garden. People hurried past with coffee cups and phones, but I greeted them anyway. Sometimes they smiled, sometimes they didn't. I still slipped extra stems into children's hands. Flowers could fix little hearts, I believed that. Daniel didn't. "You're not running a charity," he said each night, counting my coins with a sigh. He'd tap his fingers on the table. "You'll never learn, Emma." I'd smile softly. It's not always about learning, it's about giving. That afternoon, the grey-coated stranger came again. Raindrops dotted his hat. He bought a single daisy and asked, "Do you always give more than you take?" I laughed, but something about his question settled inside me like a seed. When Daniel came later, his jacket smelled faintly of smoke, sharp, metallic. I didn't ask why. I only noticed the edge of a sealed envelope peeking from his pocket, and for a reason I couldn't name, my stomach tightened. The next morning, the envelope was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Daniel handled mail all the time. Still, unease tugged at me like a loose thread. When I did the laundry, I noticed dark ash marks near his shirt pocket. He caught me looking. "Don't snoop, Emma," he said flatly. "You wouldn't understand business." His words always made me shrink a little. Silence kept the peace. At the stall, the stranger returned, studying the rows of flowers before asking, "Do daisies ever lie?" I blinked. "Flowers can't lie." He smiled. "Exactly." He bought one stem, tucked it carefully into his coat, and left a folded paper under a vase when I turned away. I didn't see it until I was closing up. That evening, Daniel brought dinner home and poured wine. His charm turned up like music hiding a storm. But his eyes, cold, calculating, didn't match his smile. When I finally opened the folded paper, neat handwriting filled the page. When something feels buried, someone fears its roots. I read it again and again, the words pulsing like a warning I didn't yet understand. Rain returned the next morning, heavy enough to drown colour. My little stall became an island under a blue tarp. Still, I stayed. Selling flowers in storms was easier than facing silence at home. Daniel arrived unexpectedly, umbrella dripping, jaw tight. "You've been distracted lately," he said. "People notice when a wife acts odd." His tone made my chest tighten. "It's just the weather." We argued quietly while thunder rolled overhead. Each word felt like a crack spreading through glass. Then a courier rushed up, soaked and shivering, clutching an envelope. "Mrs. Clark, I've been trying to deliver this for weeks." Before I could speak, Daniel stepped between us. "She's not expecting mail. I'll take it." He signed quickly and ushered the man away. The courier's boots splashed off down the street, leaving only a white card floating in a puddle. When Daniel wasn't looking, I picked it up. It read, Harold Finch, Legal Affairs, Wexler and Bloom. My fingers shook. A lawyer? For me? That night, Daniel burned something in the fireplace again, the smell thick and bitter. I watched the sparks rise and wondered what truth he feared might grow from the ashes. Sleep wouldn't come. The wind scraped against the windows like fingernails. Around midnight, I heard Daniel downstairs, the dull crackle of fire and the rustle of paper. I crept halfway down the stairs and saw him feeding envelopes into the flames one by one, his face lit orange and hard. The smell of burning ink filled the house. He turned suddenly. Couldn't sleep. Just thirsty, I said quickly. His stare lingered. Go back to bed, Emma. I obeyed, but after he left I slipped into the room again. The fire had nearly died. On the rug lay a half-burned page, curling at the edges. I picked it up carefully. The words still visible read, Inheritance, Emma Clark. My throat closed. My grandmother had died the year before, leaving only a box of tools, or so Daniel had claimed. Why would a lawyer write about an inheritance for me? I pressed the scrap to my chest, heart hammering. Upstairs, Daniel snored softly, unaware that one word had changed everything. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I didn't know where this truth would lead, but I was finally ready to dig for it, no matter what I uncovered. The next morning dawned pale and restless. Clouds hung low like heavy thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that the grey-coated stranger knew more than he'd ever said. When he appeared again at the stall, his voice carried over the hum of passing buses. You look troubled. I hesitated. Do you know anything about a lawyer named Harold Finch? He tilted his head. Names matter less than what people hide behind them. Before I could ask what he meant, he added softly, You deserve truth, not protection. His words stirred something deep, both hope and fear. Then Daniel's car screeched up beside us. His jaw clenched tight. Get in, Emma. The stranger didn't move. For a second, their eyes met. My husband's sharp and guarded, the stranger's calm and knowing. I got in, hands trembling. The car smelled of smoke again. That night, when Daniel showered, I crept into his office. Behind his desk hung a framed photo of us smiling. I lifted it and found a locked drawer. I traced its cold handle, remembering the stranger's phrase. People hide behind names. Maybe Daniel was hiding behind love, too. All day, I couldn't focus. The stall's colours blurred together, reds bleeding into yellows until everything looked the same. My heart beat too fast. When Daniel arrived mid-afternoon, he wore a forced smile. You're acting strange, he said, watching every move I made. I'm fine, I lied. He leaned closer. Is someone bothering you? The question sliced through the noise. My throat went dry. Then, as if summoned by fate, the stranger appeared across the street, grey coat flapping in the wind. Daniel turned to see him. Who's that? No one, I blurted too quickly. When I glanced again, the man was gone, but something small glittered where he'd stood. After Daniel left, I crossed the street and found a tiny silver key tied to a strip of paper. In neat handwriting, it read, The truth waits where trust is locked. That night, I waited until Daniel fell asleep before tiptoeing downstairs. I knelt before the locked drawer. The key turned with a soft click. Inside lay ashes, folded letters, and the faint smell of guilt. I whispered to the empty room, What did you do, Daniel? The drawer held the ghosts of secrets. Burned paper crumbled under my fingers. My pulse roared in my ears as I read what little survived. Inheritance, Emma Clark. That one word, inheritance, split the air open. I slammed the drawer shut just as footsteps sounded in the hall. I barely had time to stand before Daniel appeared, his expression unreadable. What are you doing up? I couldn't sleep, I said, trying to sound calm. His gaze lingered on my hands. You shouldn't wander around at night. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You scare easily. He brushed past me, and the smell of smoke followed. When his door finally closed, I exhaled a shaky breath. The next morning, I smiled at him as if nothing had changed, but inside, my resolve hardened like ice. At the stall, customers came and went, unaware of the war inside me. I packed early and caught the bus to the address on the card, Wexler and Bloom Law Firm. Rain streaked the window as I rode. Every mile pulled me closer to answers and danger. The law office towered above a quiet street, all glass and steel against the grey sky. My reflection looked small in the door's surface, just a florist clutching an umbrella. Inside, the air smelled like polished wood and expensive ink. A receptionist glanced up. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said. "I'm Emma Clark. Someone named Harold Finch tried to contact me." Her brows lifted slightly. "We've been trying to reach you for months." She typed fast, then gestured to a seat. While I waited, I stared at the rain running down the window. Why had Daniel hidden this from me? After a few tense minutes, the woman returned, holding a sealed envelope. "Mr. Finch isn't available, but he left this." My name, written in my grandmother's familiar handwriting, stared back at me. I almost opened it right there, but Daniel's voice echoed in my head. "Don't snoop, Emma." I slipped it into my bag and turned to leave. Then something on the wall froze me in place. A framed photo of my grandmother shaking hands with a man in a grey suit. It was him, the stranger from my stall. Cold ran through me like water. The stranger wasn't just a passerby, he'd known my grandmother. The thought struck hard, leaving my knees weak. I clutched the envelope like a lifeline as I hurried down the wet steps of the law office. Rain poured from the grey sky, soaking my hair, my coat, my skin. The city lights blurred through the downpour until everything looked like melted glass. I didn't even open my umbrella. I needed the rain to keep me grounded, to wash away the dizziness of truth starting to break through. By the time I reached the bus stop, the envelope was damp but unbroken. I held it under my jacket, trembling. Who was Harold Finch, really? And why had he been watching me all this time? The bus came, empty and humming. I sat near the window, staring at the reflections of streetlights sliding across the glass. My grandmother's face flashed in my mind. Her warm eyes, her soft laugh when she'd say, "Kindness always finds its way home." That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I sat by the window of our small living room. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock and the whisper of wind against the glass. The letter lay in my lap, the paper soft and aged, as though it had been waiting patiently for years. My hands shook as I broke the seal. "My dear Emma," it began, "if you are reading this, then you have proven your heart is still kind. Come to Hillcrest Estate to learn the rest. Do not bring anyone who lies." My breath caught. Hillcrest, her old home, sold before she passed. Why now? Why me? I pressed the letter to my chest. "You knew, didn't you, Grandma?" I whispered. "You knew what he'd done." The next morning, the stranger didn't appear at my stall. Instead, a small girl walked up shyly, clutching a crumpled receipt. "He told me to give you this," she said before running off. On the back, in neat handwriting, were the words, "The truth blooms when love is honest." And beneath it, pressed flat and perfect, was a single white daisy. Fragile, eternal, and waiting. I turned the small receipt over and over in my hands that night. "The truth blooms when love is honest." The words made my skin prickle. I thought of my grandmother's garden, the wild daisies, the old wooden gate, the sound of bees buzzing in summer. She always said truth was like a seed. It might hide in the dirt for a while, but it would grow eventually. I decided to search for Hillcrest Estate. After hours online, I found an address 2 towns away. My pulse raced. When Daniel came home, I hid my phone. He poured himself a drink and said casually, "That man at your stall, who is he?" I froze. A customer. He stared hard at me, then smiled in a way that made my stomach twist. "Good," he said, "because you and I don't keep secrets, right?" I smiled weakly and nodded. But that night, while he slept, I packed my grandmother's letter into my purse and whispered to myself, "We do now." The next morning, I left early, pretending I had a flower delivery. The road to Hillcrest wound through green fields and fog. My heart thudded with each turn. When I finally reached the estate, my breath caught. It was surrounded by a tall, rusted gate. Wild daisies grew through the cracks. The air smelled like old rain and forgotten memories. I pushed the gate gently. It creaked open. Inside stood an overgrown garden, silent and still. I walked slowly, the grass brushing my shoes. Suddenly, a voice behind me said, "You came." I turned. It was the stranger, Harold Finch. "You knew my grandmother," I whispered. He nodded. "She asked me to find you, to see if your heart stayed kind, even when life wasn't." I wanted to ask more, but my throat tightened. Harold smiled sadly. "You've already passed the test, Emma, but there's one more truth you must face." Before I could speak, he handed me another envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened it, and then I heard footsteps behind us. Daniel's voice sliced through the quiet. "So this is where you've been sneaking off to?" I froze, the letter half open. "How did you find me?" I stammered. "You left your GPS on," he said coldly. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Harold stepped between us, calm but firm. "Mr. Clark, this doesn't concern you." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Doesn't concern me. I'm her husband." I could barely breathe. Daniel's eyes burned with fury. "You've been hiding things from me," I said quietly. "Letters from my grandmother." His expression hardened. "I was protecting you. That money would ruin you, Emma. You'd waste it on strangers and flowers." Tears blurred my vision. "You mean you didn't want me to know?" For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Daniel turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the path. Harold's gaze softened. He can't bury truth forever. I finally looked down at the letter in my hand. The wax seal had cracked. It was time to read it. The letter inside was short but powerful, and as I unfolded it, the faint scent of lavender drifted out. The same perfume my grandmother used to wear. Her handwriting was graceful, steady, as if she'd written it knowing her words would have to hold me one day. "Emma, if this reaches you, then you've shown patience and heart. Your inheritance is not just money, it's a legacy. Hillcrest is yours, but use it wisely. Grow beauty from truth." I read it twice, then again, letting every curve of her pen sink into me. Hillcrest, mine. The thought didn't fit at first. It felt too large, too unreal. The house, the gardens, everything she had loved belonged to me now. My voice cracked. "She left this for me?" Harold placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "She wanted you to have this place, to make it live again." His tone was kind but filled with something heavier, relief maybe. Tears blurred my sight. All this time Daniel knew. Harold nodded solemnly. "He intercepted the letters. We suspected it, but we needed proof, and we needed to see who you were when no one was watching." The truth fell into place like pieces of glass forming a window. The stranger's visits, the daisy, the burned letters. It had all been a test. I laughed softly through my tears. All those little tests. Harold's smile was warm. "You passed them by being yourself, Emma." For the first time in months, the pressure in my chest loosened. I felt light again, like the world had turned upright. Then Harold handed me a small box. "One more thing your grandmother left behind." Inside, resting on velvet, was a single silver key that shimmered in the light, waiting for its door. The key felt warm in my hand. "What does it open?" I asked. Harold smiled. "You'll see." He led me toward the old house at the edge of the garden. Its windows were covered in ivy, and the door groaned when he pushed it open. Dust filled the air, but sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, making the place glow softly. We walked through rooms filled with faded memories, books, teacups, a rocking chair. Then we reached a small locked chest near the fireplace. I fit the key into the lock and turned it. Inside were photographs of my grandmother and me as a child, pressed flowers, and a final note. If you find this, Emma, promise me one thing. Use what I left you to build kindness where the world forgets it. My tears dropped onto the page. I looked up at Harold. She really believed in me. She did, he said softly. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds. I knew what I had to do next. Face Daniel one last time. I drove home from Hillcrest in silence, the letter and the silver key pressed tight against my chest. The road blurred under the tires as dusk melted into night. Each mile felt heavier, filled with the weight of everything I now knew. My grandmother's words echoed in my head. Grow beauty from truth. When I stepped into the kitchen, Daniel was already there, waiting. The lights were low, shadows stretching long across the floor. His arms were crossed, his eyes sharp. Where were you? My voice came out soft but steady. I went to Hillcrest. He stiffened. So, you know. The words hung between us, fragile and dangerous. You lied to me, I said, my throat tight. You burned her letters. He slammed his fist against the counter. I did it for us, Emma. That inheritance would have changed you. We're fine the way we are. Tears filled my eyes. You don't get to decide who I am. For a moment, he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the fear beneath his anger. The kind of fear that grows when someone's power starts to slip away. His shoulders slumped. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out. The door slammed shut, echoing through the house. Silence rushed in, but it wasn't heavy anymore. I stood in it, shaking, realizing I was finally free of his hold. Later that night, I drove back to Hillcrest. The wind carried the scent of rain and daisies. At the gate, I held the key close and whispered to the dark, I choose truth. The lock turned easily, like the world had been waiting for me to open it. The next morning, I packed a small bag and left home. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to explain. Hillcrest felt like a new world, wild, overgrown, but alive. I spent the day cleaning, opening windows, and letting sunlight back into the old rooms. Harold stopped by that afternoon, carrying a small envelope. Your grandmother's will has been fully processed, he said. Everything, this house, the land, and the savings, belongs to you. I could barely speak. I don't know what to do with it all. He smiled. You'll figure it out. You always have. When he left, I stood at the window, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. But later that night, headlights flashed outside. My heart jumped. Daniel's car. I hesitated, then opened the door. He stood there, rain dripping from his coat, eyes tired. I just came to see if it's true, he said quietly. It is, I replied. Everything. He sighed. Then I guess you don't need me anymore. Rain poured harder, drumming against the roof. Daniel stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I thought I was protecting us. By lying to me? My voice shook. By burning what my grandmother left? He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand. I was scared. You're better than me, Emma. You always were. For a moment, pity flickered in me, but I swallowed it. This isn't about being better. It's about being honest. He looked down. I just wanted to belong somewhere. I stepped closer, tears burning my eyes. Then you should have trusted me. Love isn't control. He turned and walked away into the rain. No goodbye. I watched until his car disappeared down the road, leaving muddy tire tracks behind. When I closed the door, I felt a strange calm settle inside me. Sometimes love ends quietly, not with shouting, but with truth. I looked around Hillcrest and whispered, now I begin again. Days turned into weeks. I fixed broken windows, cleared the gardens, and painted the front door bright yellow, the colour my grandmother loved. Each morning I worked until my hands ached, and each evening I walked among the flowers, feeling her presence everywhere. One afternoon, Harold returned. "You've brought this place back to life," he said, smiling. I looked at the daisies swaying in the wind. "It feels like she's still here." He nodded. "She wanted you to use this inheritance to spread kindness." I thought for a long time before answering. "I will. I'll turn Hillcrest into a garden for everyone, a place to grow, to breathe, to heal." Harold's eyes shone. "That's exactly what she hoped you'd do." He handed me a small card. "You'll need this to finalize ownership at the city office." When I glanced down, I saw his full name printed neatly. Harold Finch, Estate Advisor. I smiled softly. "Thank you for everything." He tipped his hat. "No, Emma, thank you for proving her right." That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the last light fade behind the hills. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. I opened my grandmother's letter one more time and traced her handwriting with my finger. "Grow beauty from truth." Her words glowed softly in the lamplight. I thought of Daniel somewhere out there, maybe realizing what honesty costs when you trade it for comfort. I didn't hate him. I just pitied him. Then I looked around Hillcrest at the quiet rooms that now hummed with life and smiled. The inheritance wasn't just about money or land. It was about roots, about knowing where I came from and who I wanted to be. Tomorrow I'd reopen my flower stall, but this time beside the gates of Hillcrest. I'd call it the Daisy Trust, because truth, like a flower, always finds its way back to the sun. The grand opening of the Daisy Trust came sooner than I'd dreamed. Word had travelled through the town like wind through petals. The old Hillcrest garden was alive again. Children darted between rows of new blooms, their laughter ringing against the stone walls. The air smelled of damp soil and hope. A violinist played near the fountain while elderly neighbours handed out lemonade in glass jars. I walked among them, dizzy with gratitude. Every flower felt like a heartbeat. For the first time, I saw the place breathe again. As I handed a daisy to a shy boy, he whispered, "It's for my mum. She's sick." "Tell her it means strength," I said, and he ran off smiling. My chest ached with quiet pride. Near the gate stood Harold, hat in hand, watching everything with soft eyes. I hurried to him, but he stopped me with a small envelope. "One last gift," he said. "Your grandmother asked me to give you this when the garden bloomed again." Inside was an old photograph, Grandma and me in this very place, daisies in our hair, laughter caught mid-moment. On the back she'd written, "Truth always blooms, Emma. Don't stop planting it." The noise of the crowd faded. I pressed the photo to my heart and whispered, "I won't." The weeks after the opening felt like a dream. The Daisy Trust became more than a garden. It became a pulse for the whole town. People brought stories, songs, and quiet tears. Some came to remember, others came to begin again. I watched strangers help each other plant bulbs, their hands muddy and smiling. It was the kind of kindness money could never buy. One golden evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, a familiar figure stood beyond the fence. Daniel. He looked thinner, older, his eyes hollow yet gentle. "You really did it," he said softly. "Yes," I answered, without lies this time. He nodded, studying the ground. "I thought I was saving you. Turns out I was saving my pride." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I stepped forward and held out a single daisy. "You lost trust, Daniel, but trust can be replanted, just not here." He took the flower carefully, rain glinting in his lashes. "I'm sorry, Emma." "I know." He turned to leave, pausing at the gate. "Take care of yourself." I watched him disappear down the road, the flower still bright in his hand. The ache in my chest wasn't anger anymore, it was peace finally taking root. Autumn brushed the garden with gold. Every leaf seemed to clap softly as it fell. I spent my mornings tending new seedlings and my afternoons writing letters to donors who wanted to support the trust. Sometimes I'd sit beneath the old oak and read notes people left among the flowers. Thank you for hope. You reminded me to forgive. This place saved me. One afternoon, Harold arrived carrying a thermos of tea. We sat on the stone steps watching children chase each other through piles of leaves. "You've built more than a garden," he said. "You've built a second chance for everyone who walks through that gate." I smiled. "I just followed Grandma's map." He handed me a folder. "The Daisy Trust is now a registered foundation. You'll have volunteers, sponsors, everything." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. "It's bigger than me now." "That was always the plan," he said kindly. "Legacy isn't about ownership, it's about growth." When he left, I lingered by the gate, the sunset spilling across the fields. I thought of Grandma, of Daniel, of the stranger who once picked up a fallen daisy. Every story, every route had led me here. Winter came like a whisper. Frost kissed the petals silver, and the garden looked like a fairy tale frozen in time. Yet even under snow, I felt life stirring beneath the surface. Inside the Hillcrest house, I lit fires and read Grandma's letters by their orange glow. Each line felt like she was beside me again, humming softly, reminding me that rest was part of growth. One evening, a knock sounded on the door. When I opened it, Harold stood there wrapped in a thick scarf, 2 steaming mugs in his hands. "I figured gardeners don't hibernate," he said, smiling. We sat by the hearth, listening to the crackle of wood. "I've watched you change," he said quietly. "You turned betrayal into something that heals others." I looked into the flames. "Some days I still feel the pain." He nodded. "That's how you know it mattered." We talked for hours about the past, the town, the future of the trust. Outside, snow fell in soft waves, covering the garden like a promise waiting to be unwrapped. When he finally left, I stood at the window. The world glittered white, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. Spring returned brighter than ever. The earth hummed with colour, pink blossoms, green shoots, and 1,000 dancing daisies. I walked the paths barefoot, feeling the cool soil between my toes. Children's laughter echoed from every corner, and volunteers painted benches beneath the trees. Near the entrance, I placed a brass plaque that read, "The Daisy Trust, for those who still believe in kindness." People stopped to read it, smiling, touching the letters like they meant something sacred. As I watched them, I thought about everything that had brought me here. Grandma's faith, Harold's guidance, Daniel's mistakes, and my own courage to face the truth. Later, when the sun sank low, I sat at the gate with a notebook. I wrote a letter, not to anyone, just to life itself. "Dear Truth, thank you for waiting for me. I was slow to see you, but you never stopped blooming." A gentle wind moved through the garden, carrying the scent of daisies. I felt it brush my cheek, warm and familiar, and whispered, "I'm home." Because the real inheritance wasn't land or money. It was honesty, compassion, and the strength to start again. And as the stars appeared above Hillcrest, I finally understood. No lie can bury what's meant to grow.
Look how beautiful these are getting.
We planted so many today.
It's lovely here.